What if the key to his obsession isn't in what you do, but in how unpredictably you do it? And what if your greatest power has been buried under years of trying to be pleasing, available, and emotionally safe? Let's be honest. Women have been conditioned, subtly, consistently, to equate love with effort, to believe that being constantly available, emotionally open, and endlessly giving will eventually earn them loyalty. But behavioral science tells a different story. And the truth can be unsettling. In the world of operant conditioning, what creates obsession isn't consistency, it's intermittence, unpredictability. That moment when the reward comes, not when it's expected, but when it surprises. In behavioral terms, this is called intermittent reinforcement, and it's the most powerful conditioning schedule known to psychology. It doesn't just hold attention, it hooks it. But here's the twist. Most women apply this principle against themselves. They fall for the unavailable man, the hot and cold lover, the one who gives just enough to keep them guessing. They confuse the emotional roller coaster with passion because their nervous system has been trained to respond to uncertainty as desire. Now pause for a moment and flip the frame. What happens when you become the source of emotional unpredictability? Not as a game, not as manipulation, but as a woman who is so deeply rooted in her autonomy, so tuned into her own rhythm, that she no longer feels the need to perform consistency in order to keep someone. A woman who gives from desire, not duty, who disappears into her own world, not to punish, but because she simply enjoys being there. That kind of woman doesn't just attract interest, she creates emotional imprinting. She becomes the unexpected source of pleasure, rare, irregular, and unforgettable. Skinner would say, behavior that is reinforced intermittently is more resistant to extinction. This means that if a man experiences your affection, your attention, your presence not as a given, but as something spontaneous, vibrant, and alive, his brain begins to crave the next experience. He doesn't take it for granted, he anticipates it. He starts looking for patterns. He attaches not just to you, but to the feeling you create. But this only works if it's authentic. You cannot fake unpredictability. You must live it. And to do that, you need to reclaim your emotional independence, not as a strategy, but as a lifestyle. So let's start by stripping away the old scripts that taught you to be consistent, accommodating, and emotionally predictable. What if those very behaviors, your constancy, your availability, have dulled his emotional curiosity? In the chapters ahead, we'll explore the psychological architecture of desire, not as manipulation, but as liberation. You'll understand how your behavior conditions not just others, but yourself. And you'll learn how to shift from the role of the emotionally reinforced to the emotionally reinforcing. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not show up when expected. Let's begin by diving into the mechanics of this with precision, starting with the most misunderstood force in emotional psychology: intermittent reinforcement. There's a strange paradox in desire. The more predictable something is, the less we value it. The moment it becomes routine, our nervous system registers it as background noise. But if that same affection comes and goes, if it arrives with warmth and then recedes into mystery, it becomes unforgettable. This isn't magic, it's psychology. And it has everything to do with intermittent reinforcement. In Skinner's behavioral experiments, when a reward was given unpredictably, not every time, not on a schedule, but at random intervals, subjects responded with more intensity, more persistence, and more emotional attachment. They pressed the lever longer, they waited more anxiously, they became obsessed. Why? Because unpredictability creates arousal, not just sexual, but neurological. It triggers a release of dopamine, the neurochemical behind motivation and pursuit. The uncertainty keeps the mind alert, constantly scanning for signs, constantly interpreting the environment. Now, imagine what this means in emotional terms. When a woman's attention comes suddenly with warmth, depth, or joy, and then she retreats back into her own world, her own life, the contrast leaves an imprint. It's not that she's withholding, it's that she's free from the need to constantly reward. And that freedom makes her unforgettable. Unpredictable rewards heighten anticipation, a kind message when it's least expected, a look of admiration after days of quiet distance, a night of closeness that isn't followed by needy follow-ups, but by silence that feels like self-sufficiency. These moments don't build dependency, They build intrigue. This is what makes a man emotionally chase instead of emotionally consume. But here's the danger. Many women hear this and start to strategize. They start playing games, delaying replies, acting distant, forcing silence. That's not power, that's insecurity wearing a mask. Skinner would warn you, behavior that is externally manipulated loses its authenticity, and sooner or later, reinforcement loses its effect. What matters is that your unpredictability comes from truth, not from performance. You're not always available because you have a full life. You're not constantly reassuring because you've stopped over-functioning. You don't smother him with presents because you've learned to enjoy your own. The highs must come from a place of real emotional abundance, a surprise kiss because you felt it, a kind word because you meant it, and then a return to your center, not because you're testing him, but because you don't orbit anyone. This doesn't make you manipulative. It makes you magnetic. And yes, many men will not be able to tolerate this, because it doesn't feed their need for control or constant affirmation. But the one who is ready for emotional connection, not just validation, will lean in. He'll stay curious. He'll ask, where did she go? Not in panic, but in fascination. Because in a world of emotional overexposure, you are not a constant stream. You are a rhythm, a pulse, a wave that rises and retreats. Ask yourself now, have you been rewarding without rhythm, giving without space, predictable to the point of invisibility? Because the moment you stop being always available is the moment someone starts really seeing you. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into the foundation of that magnetism, emotional independence, and why the woman who doesn't need attention becomes the one who draws it effortlessly. There is a particular kind of woman who doesn't chase, doesn't prove, doesn't over-explain, and yet she draws attention like gravity. Not because she's loud or flirtatious or endlessly affirming, but because she is emotionally sovereign. She doesn't need anyone to complete her story. She chooses to share space but never abandons her own. That is the woman men remember, and often the one they're not quite sure how to handle. Emotional independence is not coldness. It's not detachment or superiority. It's the quiet knowing that you are whole even when alone. It's the capacity to sit with your own thoughts, pursue your own interests, and feel grounded in your solitude. Not as a defense, but as a home. From a behavioral perspective, this independence is a signal. It tells the environment, I am not here to be controlled by your reinforcement. In Skinner's terms, it's the shift from being shaped by external consequences to choosing your own contingencies. You stop responding out of fear of loss or hunger for approval. You start acting from a place of intention. And that shift is deeply attractive. Why? Because emotional overdependence feels heavy. It smells like desperation, no matter how subtly it's disguised. It makes every interaction a test, every silence a threat, every distance a wound. And over time, it turns intimacy into obligation. But the emotionally independent woman doesn't wait by the phone. She's not tracking his moods or adjusting herself to keep him close. She's cultivating her own joy, her own rituals, her own forward motion. When a man enters her space, he feels her energy, but he doesn't own it. That difference is everything. This is why pursuing personal passions matters, not as a tactic to seem busy, but because a woman lit by her own fire doesn't ask to be fueled by someone else. She is not trying to escape her life through love. She's trying to expand it. And the truth is, a woman who is emotionally independent will attract fewer men, but far better ones. Because she cannot be manipulated through absence, she doesn't collapse when someone withdraws. She knows how to self-soothe, how to refocus, how to keep her center. Skinner might say her reinforcement system has shifted. She no longer relies on external rewards to maintain emotional regulation. She's reconditioned herself to find pleasure in autonomy, meaning in solitude, and stability in self-responsibility. And yes, that may trigger some men, especially those used to women who conform, who wait, who bend. But it also awakens something deeper in the ones who are emotionally mature. Respect, fascination, a desire to meet her at that level. So ask yourself now without judgment, do you reach out because you truly want to connect, or because you're afraid of being forgotten? Do you give space because you trust the bond, or because you're punishing him with silence. Because emotional independence isn't about doing less, it's about needing less. And in that space of needing less, you radiate more. A woman who is always available becomes emotionally invisible, not because her presence isn't valuable, but because it becomes expected. Automatic, taken for granted. And human behavior, as Skinner revealed so clearly, is quick to ignore what's consistently present without contrast. This is where the power of selective availability comes into play. Let's be precise. Selective availability is not manipulation. It's not pretending to be busy when you're not, or delaying messages to provoke anxiety. That's performance, rooted in fear and control. True selective availability arises naturally when you are prioritizing your time, your space, and your peace. You are not unavailable to punish, but because you're available to yourself. Scarcity, in behavioral terms, increases value, not because the item has changed, but because access to it is now earned, not assumed. When a man knows that you are always emotionally on call, he may feel comforted, but he will also begin to devalue the interaction, not consciously, not with cruelty, but because his brain adapts. The consistency dulls his attention. The reward becomes routine. But when your presence is earned through rhythm, when some days are full of warmth and others are quietly yours, he begins to attune. He pays closer attention. He doesn't just receive, you make him notice. This is not about playing hard to get. It's about no longer being emotionally on demand. Most women who struggle with this carry a deeper wound. The fear that if they're not fully available, they'll be abandoned. That if they set a boundary, the connection will die. So they offer constant access. They answer immediately. They soothe quickly. They give too much, too soon, too often. But access without discernment breeds entitlement. And Skinner would say, the more you reinforce a behavior without conditions, the more likely it becomes automatic and ungrateful. This doesn't just shape how he behaves. It shapes how you feel about your giving. Because eventually what was once joy becomes obligation. You feel unseen, unappreciated, and emotionally exhausted. Selective availability restores balance. It protects the sacredness of your emotional energy. Imagine this: a woman who doesn't answer right away, not because she's calculating, but because she's deeply immersed in a book, or walking in silence, or having coffee with herself. That delay, when authentic, signals value. It tells the world, my time is filled, my life is rich, I do not need your presence to feel complete. And when she does respond, her presence is felt, not out of duty, but because she chose that moment. This creates a powerful tension, a space in which desire can grow, not because she's cold, but because she's contained. She isn't available for emotional consumption, she is available for connection. But balance is essential. Too much distance, and you create confusion. Too much intensity, and you overwhelm. The key is calibrated rhythm, being warm when you're truly moved to be, and retreating when you need restoration. This rhythm teaches a man to listen, to engage, to respect your availability rather than expecting it. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. And every time you assert your availability with honesty, whether it's a not right now, a delayed reply, or an unapologetic evening offline, you reinforce a deeper truth. You are not a reward to be claimed. You are an experience to be invited into. So ask yourself now, have you made yourself emotionally too easy to reach? Are you answering out of presence or out of pressure? Do you know what you want to feel when you respond, or are you just afraid to lose his attention? Because a woman who guards her time, her silence, and her sacred space is not difficult. She's devotional to herself, and the right man won't punish you for your boundaries. He'll rise to meet them. In the next chapter, we'll explore the deeper roots of that inner magnetism, living with purpose and passion, and how the woman who walks in direction, not desperation, becomes unforgettable. A woman who knows where she's going doesn't wait for someone to give her direction. She walks her path with intention, sometimes slowly, sometimes fiercely, but always grounded in why she's moving. That kind of clarity is magnetic. You see, most of what passes for attraction in modern relationships is surface level, appearance, charm, validation loops. But the kind of pull that lasts, that haunts a man's thoughts and reshapes his emotional compass, comes from something deeper: purpose, passion, direction. In Skinnerian terms, Behavior is shaped by its consequences. But we must ask, who is defining those consequences for you? Is your life oriented around avoiding disapproval, pleasing others, or securing attention? Or are your actions being reinforced by something more enduring, like progress, meaning, and alignment with your values? When a woman reclaims her inner reinforcement system, she becomes unstoppable. She no longer waits to be chosen. She chooses. She's not auditioning for love. She's expressing life. This doesn't mean you need a grand mission or a dramatic career shift. It means you reconnect with the things that awaken you: creativity, learning, movement, nurturing, building, exploring. It means you stop outsourcing your identity to your romantic status. When you are immersed in what fulfills you, something subtle shifts. You begin to radiate presence, not the anxious kind that seeks, but the grounded kind that draws. You speak with more weight. You listen with more discernment. You're no longer captivated by crumbs because you're full. A man feels that, even if he can't explain it. Purpose creates contrast. It makes your time more valuable, your presence more impactful. He can sense that you're not living reactively, waiting for the next text or the next invitation. You're already moving, already building. And if he wants to be part of your world, he has to keep up, not keep you. That is the difference between attraction and emotional imprinting. Consider this. A woman shares her latest project, not to impress but because it excites her. Her eyes light up. She speaks with depth. She's not seeking his approval. She's sharing her fire. That moment burns into his memory because it's rare and real. This is what Skinner would call natural reinforcement. You are not performing behaviors to be rewarded. You are rewarded by the behavior itself. That self-sustaining loop of passion and purpose frees you from the hunger for external validation. And paradoxically, it's what pulls others in. But let's be honest, many women lose their sense of purpose in the pursuit of relationship. They shrink, they adjust, they compromise so early, so often, they forget what made them vibrant in the first place. They think being easygoing will make them more lovable, but in reality it makes them more forgettable. You cannot be fascinating when you've flattened your soul. Real connection comes when two whole people expand each other, not when one person becomes the background music for another's life. So how do you return to that state of magnetism? You begin by asking, what did I love before I started waiting for someone? What activity makes me lose track of time and remember who I am? What do I want to build, learn, contribute, express, not for praise but for peace? This is not about being busy. This is about being alive. Because the woman who burns with purpose doesn't beg for presence, she becomes it. And that kind of presence leaves a mark. It challenges a man to bring more than charm. It requires depth, consistency, substance, and it inspires growth, not by demand, but by example. As Skinner taught, behavior is shaped by consequences, but a woman of purpose creates her own. She rewards herself with peace, joy, accomplishment, and she becomes immune to shallow reinforcement. Because when you are lit from within, you stop needing others to light the way. In the final chapter, we'll return to the heart of this truth. What makes a man obsessed is not performance, it's presence. Not perfection, but integrity. Not constant access, but authentic rhythm. There comes a point in every woman's emotional journey when she realizes she was never meant to compete, to chase, or to mold herself into the ideal of someone else's desire. She was meant to stand still, in her truth, in her rhythm, in her power, and draw. Obsession, true emotional obsession, is not created by strategy. It is not born from pretending, withholding, or playing the roles that culture carved for women who wanted to be chosen. It comes from something far more radical, authenticity. And from that authenticity flows confidence, rhythm, boundaries, purpose, and yes, unpredictability. Throughout this journey, we've walked through the behavioral blueprint that few women are ever taught. We've dismantled the myths that told you love is earned through over-availability, over-functioning, and over-giving, and we've replaced them with grounded insight, patterns of reinforcement, emotional conditioning, and psychological freedom. You've seen how intermittent reinforcement, when rooted in truth, can heighten a man's emotional engagement, not through manipulation, but through real contrast, through rhythm, through presence that isn't performed, but chosen. You've remembered that emotional independence isn't detachment, It's strength. It's what makes your yes meaningful and your no undeniable. It's what teaches others that you are not a transaction, but a whole world. You've learned that selective availability protects your energy. That constant accessibility doesn't make you more loved, it makes you less seen. And that creating space, both emotional and practical, isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And you've reclaimed the deepest part of yourself, the woman with passion and purpose who no longer drifts into relationships hoping to be defined. She defines herself, and in doing so, she becomes unforgettable, not for what she gives away, but for what she embodies. Skinner, if he were guiding this reflection, might say, freedom is not the absence of consequences. It is choosing the contingencies that reinforce the life you want. And you are choosing now. You are shaping your reinforcement system. You are becoming the woman whose presence isn't based on how much she's wanted, but on how much she wants herself. So here's your question now. Which part of this resonated most deeply with you? Was it the pull to protect your emotional energy, the desire to reconnect with your passion, the realization that your rhythm is your power? Share your insight, speak your truth in the comments, because there is something powerful about witnessing a woman who is no longer chasing attention, but commanding respect through clarity, rhythm, and purpose. And if you want to keep exploring the layers of female psychology, behavior, and emotional freedom, subscribe. This space is not about performance, it's about liberation. You don't have to be louder, you just have to be truer.